Hi, my name is Rasheeda Williams, and I was asked to talk to you a little bit about overcoming fears. I know more about fear and how fear can consume you than probably the next person. We all have had fears in our lives and struggles. For me, my struggle began early. Losing my mother when I was 7 years old, I was in second grade. And just fast forwarding to where I am today, just turned 40 on Easter of this year, 2013. And I reflected back over my life and my childhood and things that I've done and where I've been. And it's been quite a journey, and it was refreshing to see the transition from where I was as a little girl and life circumstances, because life isn't always going to be what we expect it to be, right? It's not always going to be roses or the vision of what the neighbor down the street's family looks like. We're all unique in our family situations. So if I fast forward, I want to start with this message. My uncle told me this once before. He said, Rasheeda, he said, you know what? He said, no one ever has to do anything for you. If they do, it's because they choose to. You don't have parents. My father was in jail at the time. I didn't know that. I thought he was deceased. But he was in jail, and I was adopted. And so I overcame obstacles along the way. My fear, if I had to say I had a fear, it was the fear of failure. Because I knew that my mother she was doing drugs and she just made poor choices. And what people don't realize is when you make poor choices, not only do those choices necessarily impact you, but they have an impact on others. I have 3 other sisters. My youngest sister didn't even know my mother. My mother died when my youngest sister was like 6 months old. And so your choices can have impact exponentially on others, in this case, on her kids. So my fear was of rejection. My fear was of failure, or being lumped into that bracket that everyone thought I was going to be like my mother. And I so did not want to be like my mother. And it's interesting because people today say most kids will say, I want to be like my mother. I want to be like my father or whatever. I didn't have that person as a role model. So I never knew what it's like to have your own mother, she never came to my wedding. She never saw me graduate. She never saw me have my first kid, and that's a part of me that is unresolved, but I've since moved past it because it is what it is. But getting back to fears, I think once you start to figure out where that fear base comes from, you can better navigate yourself through life. So I knew that I wanted to just overachieve and excel because I wanted everyone in my family to be proud of me, and failure was never going to be an option. And just the fear of them stigmatizing me was so intense within me as an individual in my young 20s when I graduated college. It was a driving factor for me. It drove me to want to succeed and make great money and have nice things. And I don't regret that at all, but it came to a point where I had to stop chasing the unknown. I look back one day, figuratively speaking, and I realized I'm chasing something. I'm running and nobody's really chasing me. I'm trying to prove who I am so hard. I'm realizing nobody's even looking. Nobody's paying attention. Nobody cared. And I don't mean it in a sense that they washed their hands of me, but it wasn't that serious. So the way I overcame my fears of rejection, even in relationships. I was married for 10, 11 years, and it didn't work. And I think my fear of rejection spawned from not having a real father and not having a real mother. So I just felt like family disappointed me. My sisters disappointed me. We didn't live together. I didn't know them. We just grew very detached. It was somewhat dysfunctional. And so there was a fear of rejection. And it took therapy in my older years, in recent years, to even realize where that came from, because my actions were dictating the fear more than I was even cerebrally aware of what the fear was. So, when my husband would go travel, I always knew I didn't want a traveling husband, didn't want a military guy. I knew all these things I didn't want. I didn't know why I felt that way. And it was only until recent years when I had therapy that I realized the baseline of where that came from. And it basically came from me fearing rejection, fearing another loss. I'm thinking, what else can I lose? I've lost my mom. I've lost my dad. I've lost my sisters. I have nothing that's my own. I'll lose my husband too. Because, and so I was afraid that him going away, even for work, be it innocent or otherwise, was a form of rejection. And I've since gotten better, through therapy and prayer and just honing in on knowing what that fear factor was. I'm better able today in my personal relationships to navigate a lot better. So I say to you, in the name of fear, find out where the source is coming from. And I think Dr. Phil says it best. You can't fix what you don't acknowledge. When you acknowledge that you do have a fear base, you can better work through it. And it becomes about choices at some point. You make the choice to say, I no longer will fear this. I no longer, you care about rejection. You care about fears of whatever your fear factor is. But you have to file it accordingly, and don't let that be the stimulus and the driving factor that determines your fate moving forward. I'm healthier today than I've ever been, and I'm happier. I've lost a lot along the way. I've been hurt a lot along the way. But those little hurts make for a bigger, better, brighter me today. In my 40s, I just turned 40. I'm happy. You know, if I'm by myself, I'm okay. But I'm happy. And that's where I want you all to get to, the point in your fear factor, identifying it and just going, you know what? Kind of, it is what it is. And then I like to say, it ain't what it ain't either. And just be happy and let yourself, and instead of extraneous things, be the driving forces, to be the stimulus to perpetuate the fears in your lives. You know, I'm not saying I'm an Oprah, you know, but I like to lead by example. I have 3 beautiful sons. And, you know, so out of all that stuff that was back there in my childhood, there's been some positives along the way. You know, having my sons, I've got a great job. I've got a great life. I do fantastic things. We travel, and I have a really fulfilled life. So I look back and go, what was I afraid of? You know, if you're afraid, when I travel internationally, people say, why are you going by yourself? Aren't you afraid? You might get attacked. You might get this. Yeah, there's a possibility of that. But if I let that drive me, I'll be stuck right here in the same place, because I'm waiting for my friends to come up with the money or do whatever, and I'll never go anywhere. I'll never have seen anything. I won't even live. Fear cannot drive you. Cannot drive you. And that's my message. If you feel the urge to do something, it's not about social niceties. If someone likes you or approves of it or disapproves, you know, my ideal is never to travel by myself, but it is what it is. So I do. It's not the ideal, but it's reality. And I want to experience the world. And if I have to experience it by myself, with myself, then I will. So sometimes you kind of can't even share your dreams with people, because if you do, they become like your dream stealers. You've heard that word before. People just, they want to be happy for you, but they kind of can't. And you'll see that. So a lot of things I have to keep to myself, because I don't want your stuff to echo on me, your fears to bleed on me, because I'm working through my own fears. I don't need your stuff too. So I find myself, I don't share a lot of things with people, because I'm okay with my decisions. And, you know, the fear of the unknown. Well, will you have a job if you buy this big old house, or a house in general? Don't even have to be big quantitatively. You buy this car, you buy this. Will you be able to afford it? What if you lose your job? Those are fears we can't control. So all you can do is work off and identify what I know today, what I have today. I'm good. So just recognize where they come from. Keep negativity out of your lives. Minimize dream stealers, and then know who you can share your dreams and your visions and your goals with, that are truly going to be happy for you, and people who will also be happy in your successes. You know, I was listening something from T.D. Jakes the other day, and he said, favor ain't fair. You know, you look at somebody and you say, wow, you seem to have everything going your way. You stay blessed. You stay this, you say that. When is it going to be my turn? And TD said, just tell people favor isn't fair. There's no round robining scheme to favor. It's not about serving number 1, number 2, number 3. God may go from number 1 to number 50. And you may be number 2 next up. And you may get skipped over, because favor ain't fair. Control what you can. Do your level best at all times. And you'll start to work through some of those fears. And you'll conquer them. And you'll realize you were holding yourself back. And that's what I realized. I was holding me back based on unknown fears, based on unsubstantiated fears. So I hope that this was inspiring. I thank you, Nancy, for giving me an opportunity to share my story. It's a long story, so I try to condense it in 10 minutes or less. And I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to just share little wisdoms with people. And there's so much more, but just own your stuff, be happy, be present, and live out loud. If you have fear, you won't be able to live out loud. You'll live in secret. You'll live in a closet, if you will. So just live out loud. And who cares if people accept it? Who cares if people like you? Just, you know, it is what it is. Be blessed.